ये है जानो जंक्शन।
My name is Gita, and I'm a Chicago resident who laughs at the idea of Donald Trump being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. This nomination should not be taken seriously for many reasons, and is in fact very insulting to those individuals around the world who have been actually working tirelessly to end wars and solve humanitarian crises in the past year. For starters, I'd like to point out that being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize is not necessarily an accomplishment in itself, and the bar is actually very low. Do you know who else was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize historically? Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. Yeah, that's right. Hitler was nominated as something of a sarcastic critique, but I digress. My point is, being a Nobel Prize nominee does not mean that Trump is a good or respectable person who actually works to broker peace deals. In fact, I would argue that he's quite the opposite. Let's talk about a few things that he said and done over the past few years, just to jog your memory. During his inaugural address nearly 4 years ago, he pointed out that, quote, "It is the right of all nations to put their own interests first." But instead of putting the nation first, Trump has done what he's always done best. He puts his own selfish interests before the interests of anyone else, at the cost of American lives and the lives of global citizens. Here's a rundown. Trump boasted about weapons deals with Saudi Arabia, while peace groups accused the U.S. of fueling the kingdom's war in Yemen. He vetoed a bill to end U.S. involvement in Yemen's war. He removed the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord, a voluntary agreement to limit carbon emissions, despite the urgency of reducing climate change for the common good of our planet. He instituted a travel ban on a whim to block travelers from 6 Muslim-majority countries and froze refugee intake from Syria, completely ignoring the U.S.'s global responsibility to support the people of nations that it devastates through military action. He tripled the pace of U.S. bombing in Afghanistan. Military spending increased for the 5th year in a row, nearing levels reached during the Iraq War. On live TV, he bragged about selling $12.5 billion in military weapons to Saudi Arabia. He's a dictator basically doing live reenactments of every historical moment in the fascist playbook. He frequently insults other world leaders, like calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and threatening, quote, fire and fury if they continue with launches. He later said he would, quote, totally destroy North Korea. Definitely Nobel Prize winner kind of move. He rolled back U.S. ties with Cuba. He tried to end the DACA program, leaving 800,000 Dreamers vulnerable to deportation. He withdrew the U.S. from the Iran nuclear agreement, without citing any violations on Iran's side, and reinstated sanctions for no reason. He broke with decades of U.S. policy and recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and later moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, basically spitting in the face of Palestinians and clearly showing that he's not a broker in peace for the region, and is not taking any humanitarian concerns into consideration whatsoever. Under his push, the U.S. withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council. He instituted a zero-tolerance policy at the border and separated 2,600 children from their parents, causing irreparable trauma and harm to children and their families. He requested interference from foreign governments, withholding military aid to Ukraine and asking them to investigate his political rival Joe Biden. He was impeached by the House of Representatives for these despicable actions, but unfortunately not removed from office by the Senate. He abruptly withdrew U.S. troops from Syria in November 2019, putting long-term U.S. allies at the mercy of a Turkish military assault. And finally, during the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, Trump denied the threat of the virus for several months, encouraged people to consume bleach at one point, downplayed the deaths of 191,000 Americans to date, and instead blamed China for spreading the virus, instead of taking responsibility for his failure to take meaningful and decisive action to mitigate the early spread of the virus. He encourages violence at his rallies. He has been recorded bragging about how he can get away with sexually assaulting women. He has mocked a disabled reporter. And he recently was revealed to have called military members who devoted their careers to the nation, quote, losers and suckers. According to Nobel's will, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, quote, shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses. If I could choose one person who is the absolute antithesis of everything that the Nobel Peace Prize stands for, someone who incites disorder, who sows chaos, wreaks havoc between diverse peoples, and who encourages division rather than world unity, that person would be none other than Donald J. Trump. So just to be very clear, Donald Trump may be a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize, but I assure you, he will never be its winner.